So let me see if I got this right. Condition Engineer does 20k DPS. Staff Elementalist does 20k DPS without Icebow. Apparently all other classes do more DPS than a Necromancer, even Guardian and Thief. Although I'm not exactly sure how people reach these conclusions, since I couldn't even find fake math which shows these facts. There's literally no spreadsheet for Guardian or Thief. But hey, the self-proclaimed top players would never make claims that fuck up an entire community just to get more views on YouTube. That's just crazy. Anyway, we'll just stick to the official fake math. So, 2 Staff Elementalists, 2 Condition Engineers and 1 Berserker Warrior should have a combined DPS of 95,000 even without Quickness and Icebow. And I'd like to remind you guys once again that the self-proclaimed top players have stated for over 2 years that there is no such thing as DPS uptime, and insulted me countless times for stating otherwise. According to them, you can have 100% DPS uptime in any and all encounters in the game, thus eliminating the need for any and all tank and healer builds. Berserker only, remember? So that means the Mossman should have died in approximately 18.5 seconds. Let's say 20 seconds to account for human error. Maybe one player was scratching his eyeball without using the Icebow. Yes. Now, it doesn't matter if you self-proclaimed top players are literally insane to even attempt something like this, in order to prove that everything or anything you have ever claimed is even remotely true, and after you fail you can go, we have nothing to prove to you. Maybe even turn on each other for being casual, like you did with Brazil, or if you just run and cower like worms. Now that the community knows the truth, it's only a matter of time before more and more people will test the real DPS values of your meta builds. I have already won, you just don't know it yet. Speaking of real HP values on bosses, I said in the beginning we will come back to those world records, remember? So Narc's DPS was 9,750, right? Right. He did 168,584 damage over 17.3 seconds. That's not even 10% of the boss's HP, even though every party member should be roughly 20% of the group's DPS. The warrior really is there just for the buffs. Buffs for exploits and broken mechanics. Since the other players were Icebow carriers. In Brazil's run, in which no Icebow was used, even though he had similar DPS and did double the amount of damage done by Narc, they only managed to kill Bloomhanger in 35 seconds. Double the time. Now, cross-reference this information with the fact that Icebow is useful only for 3.7 seconds, which is the duration of Ice Storm, and you will finally understand just how ridiculously overpowered Icebow really was, and what was actually doing the damage of the Berserker meta. There is no Berserker meta, there never was. It was the Icebow meta. But here's the catch. Unless you were using the line casting exploit, the Icebow damage would be insignificant on targets with a small hitbox. So people were actually pew-pewing while under the impression that in fact they are doing 15 to 20k DPS. Why? Because Nike and the other self-proclaimed top players advertised their so-called meta builds at 20k DPS, backed up their claims with fake math, and proved it visually with casual runs in which they either used the Icebow line casting exploit or the boss had a very large hitbox. And in the past there was the Lightning Hammer, and before that it was the Whirling Wrath menu exploit, and before that it was the Fiery Greatsword Speed into the Wall exploit, and before that there was me and a friendly non-toxic gaming community. So now you finally understand what I said during the podcast. The difference between what people think they do and what they actually do is... Now, before we go any further, I feel this would be a good time to quickly go through a subject that I also covered in part 1, which is pre-buffing. Last time I added the preparation time to the overall duration of the fight, since DPS is calculated from the first action taken, regardless if it's buffing or debuffing, since they both do damage. I noticed some people were confused, even though the majority of people seem to get it. It's really not that difficult. If you have a proper team composition, you will have maximum buffs within 6 seconds no matter what. The only question is, are those 6 seconds going to be spent doing DPS? Or do you waste that potential DPS uptime casting damaging spells in thin air? Pre-buffing a lot of the times lowers the overall effectiveness. As you've seen in both world record Gloomhanger runs, none of the teams pre-buffed. And yet after a few seconds of fighting, they were fully buffed. Everything I have said so far should have been public knowledge. Seshi, my friend, I expected more out of you. You have the skill, and you should have been able to realize all these facts on your own. But instead you chose to be the delusional elitist champion. There is no excuse. You dishonor family. You dishonor yourself. You know, I had no idea who you were until I saw you insulting me time and time again in the comment section of my own videos. But it matters not. I am willing to forgive and work together to guide the community in these troubled times. Since as the Berserker meta will slowly start to disappear, there will be a lot of confusion in the air. Join me, Seshi. But before you do that, you have to admit that you were wrong and publicly apologize to me in a video for all the times you trash my work. Do this and all will be forgotten. No one has to ever know that you actually thought Sinister Engineer and Berserker Staff Elementalist does 20k DPS. Except for what Nike and Spores did, of course. They not only trashed my work for years using fake math and exploits, trying hard to damage my credibility and therefore affect my YouTube income, but they also spread their toxic and unrealistic meta within the Guild Wars 2 community in the process. What they did will never be forgotten. I will make sure of it. Just how dare you turn the good people of Guild Wars 2 against each other and the developers? And for what? 10,000 subscribers on YouTube for Nike and a few $100 from Dalfi for Spores? Pathetic. For 2 fucking years I've put up with your bullshit. Did I not tell you, delusional elitists, I will make you eat your own words? I even warned you what would happen if you guys didn't stop. After everything you guys have done to me personally and to the Guild Wars 2 community, someone which I will not name had the nerve to contact me, demanded that I apologize, and said the best thing I can do is delete my account and never show my face again. Okay, I think I am done getting back at the delusional elitists for what they have done to me personally and to the Guild Wars 2 community. Or am I? Regardless, I don't want to end the video just yet. I may have exposed the lies of their so-called meta builds, but my goal was never to generate even more confusion. Therefore, I will at least start pointing you guys in the right direction. And I will do my best to support the Guild Wars 2 community for a little while longer at least. The Berserker meta is a lie. So, naturally the first question would be, well, what is the real meta then? What do we play now? I'm afraid the answer to that is not that simple. The Mossman has 1,760,087 HP, and the Sinister Engineer did 392,770 damage over 41.7 seconds. That's a DPS of 9,470. So tell me guys, what do you see? Yes, Nike lied about the DPS. What else? The Mossman has 1,760,087 HP. The Sinister Engineer did 392,770 damage. Even though the boss was bursted down to about 70% HP in the first 10 seconds of the fight, since he was pinned down and frozen, giving the Berserker Millier's free DPS uptime, in the end, the condition build did the most damage. Now, when you realize that in reality the Condition Engineer actually did even more damage than is being displayed on screen, unfortunately we can never know for sure what that value is, since when the Mossman goes into stealth, even though he continues to take damage from conditions, that damage is not being displayed anywhere, not even in the combat log. you guys will take the first steps in understanding the Guild Wars 2 combat system. This puny 9 to 10k DPS was actually the highest DPS in the Mossman fight. This is also the case in Sina's Mossman encounter. The condition build did the most damage. Unlike math in a void, which is so fake you can't even scale it to keep the conclusions, real DPS calculations will always speak the truth. No matter if it's a pre-made and the boss is frozen in place and the entire fight lasts 40 seconds, or if it's a pack group and the fight lasts up to 91 seconds, the outcome is pretty much the same. Now, in the fight you currently see on screen, I did considerably more DPS than being displayed, since it was a longer fight and the Mossman spent a higher time in stealth. Unfortunately, just like in the other two cases, we will never find out the real values, but we can still make an educated guess. In my Mossman solo, I used an augmented version of my upcoming hybrid build, sacrificing a lot of single target DPS in favor of AoE DPS and enhanced survivability. Yet I managed to do 1,760,087 damage in 381 seconds. That's a DPS of 4,690. Now, in my full hybrid build, I can go all the way up to 9k something DPS on Bloomhanger, and it's very important to understand that I could have gone even higher with a team composition designed to boost the damage of hybrid builds. A ranger with Frost Spirit and Sun Spirit is just an example. And of course, I couldn't keep a perfect DPS rotation on Mossman either, because of the mechanics of the fight. Didn't get a chance to do as many downfire life blast hits as you normally should, but the condition side of my hybrid still did damage. So I'm going to assume a hypothetical average from the two values, and I end up with 6,958 DPS. Using a bit of backtracking to account for the 91 seconds spent in the fight, I end up with an estimated value of 633,223 overall damage. The Mossman has 1,760,087 HP, and I may have been responsible for 633,223 of the damage. We can never know for sure, it's merely an educated guess. But even if you take the worst case scenario in this hypothesis and claim I didn't do any unregistered damage, which is literally absurd, I have still done the most amount of damage in this fight using a hybrid build, which in this case does 4,690 DPS. So with that being said, it becomes painfully obvious that it's so much easier to have higher effectiveness using a condition or hybrid build on a boss that, I don't know, is literally deadly for squishy milliers, on which you can't have 100% DPS uptime using power builds, not even if you play to perfection. But hey, don't take my word for it. Seshi, after only 3 hours of playing a Necromancer in his entire life, managed to solo the Mossman on a condition build so much faster than with his Berserker Guardian, on which he has a lot more experience on. And in his haste to trash me once again, he claimed that the Necromancer Mossman solo was the easiest solo he has ever done. Says he sure showed Nemesis, Nemesis got wrecked. I never thought my troll bait would work so perfectly. I almost spoiled the surprise. So you see, Seshi, my friend, you were already working for me, you just didn't know about it. Also, you might want to take a closer look at the number of bleeding stacks you had during your fight compared to what I had, and you will find that I was significantly higher than you, and yet you finished faster, because I was using Rampager gear and you were using full condition gear. You had higher toughness and more raw condition damage, thus literally proving that the longer the Mossman fight is and the more he stealths, the more effective you will be with the condition build. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you as my pawn. I literally couldn't have done it without you. I would have had to craft yet another Ascended set. I deserve some chocolate for this. Okay, now you've seen out DPS the Sinister Engineer build on Mossman doing 9,701 DPS. By the way, this is the highest DPS I've seen on Mossman out of all the footage the people have sent me. including my own footage. Yet Sina's best Bloomhanger attempt was only at 11k DPS, which is lower than what a Berserker Warrior or a Berserker Necromancer can put out. World record holder Narc, as well as Brazil, can go up to 10-12k DPS on Bloomhanger using Berserker builds. Yet in a fight where the boss has perma unremovable protection, their DPS drops down to about 5k, easily beatable using hybrids or condition builds. An even better example is the volcanic fractal, where Brazil's DPS went down to 1841 over 63 seconds. Imagine this. What if I were to tell you in one of my guides that my hybrid DPS, while auto-attacking with Scepter for half the fight, and yet will still be the highest DPSer in the party, doing 3 times more DPS than a Berserker Warrior? Half of you would think I'm mad, the other half would think I'm trolling. As you can see, the mechanics of this fight heavily disfavors power builds. So maybe now you guys will understand why I got so angry when I saw that bullshit Spoge wrote in his guide for Necromancers. Dagger is the best weapon for Necromancer in PvE. Ah, fuck off. How about you show us some of that famous 13.4k DPS with your Dagger 1 build in this fight? In fact, in any fight, without Time Warp. You do realize that in some fights I'm out DPSing you while auto-attacking Scepter, right? You little shit. What? You always complained you're not getting as much exposure as me. You always wanted to be famous. Here, let me help you. I'm helping. And how about you, Nike? Care to show some of that 18k DPS you thought you were doing with your Berserker warrior? Or would you like to call one of your cleric friends to help you with DPS uptime which doesn't exist? Even World of Warcraft, who had taunt and aggro system, had DPS uptime. The only thing worse than elitism is delusional elitism. Yes. By the way, of course, I have better footage. It can be done much better. In this fight, I forgot to change Epidemic to Poison Cloud, so I didn't thought I would use this footage until I saw we finished the entire Fractal, Swampland, Escalonian, and Volcanic in 27 minutes, despite me playing like a scrub in a pack group, and two of the packs never done Fractal 50 before at all. So now you can understand just how much of a difference the mechanics of the fight actually make. The current meta composition was able to kill Bloomhanger, which has 2.1 million HP in like 35 seconds without using any ice bows at all, 27 seconds while using 2 ice bows, and 17 seconds while using 4 ice bows. I say was because the ice bow had its damage nerfed in half since then. Now, compared to the Mossman, who has a lower HP of just 1.7 million, it takes over 40 seconds to kill him even with 2 ice bows, and 26 seconds with 4 ice bows. See? You can kill Bloomhanger, who has 2.1 million HP in 35 seconds with a Berserker composition, but you end up taking the same time for a boss with half that HP. Or even worse, up to a minute for a boss with lower than 1 million HP. 50 seconds while using ice bows. And don't even get me started on the legendary imbued shaman who has 1.5 million HP and people take like 2 minutes to kill him, and those are called speedruns. 2 entangles, 2 epidemics would make this fight a piece of cake. So, in conclusion, playing a game based on math in a void, which never resembles reality, not even in the best case scenarios, which is so fake you can't even scale it so you can retain some sort of conclusions out of it, while completely neglecting the game's mechanics, which is like the yin to the yang, is absolute madness. I honestly think you have to be soft in the head if you're going to teach an entire community to discriminate people based on builds and exclude entire classes out of the so-called meta based on small theoretical differences while completely ignoring the actual mechanics of the encounters. Also, claiming there is no such thing as DPS uptime since you can always have 100% DPS uptime as a full glass cannon melee. Even in fights where you literally can't, even if you were Jesus, because the boss is invulnerable to power type attacks, or he teleported away, or he is in stealth, and so on. Claiming Sinister Engineer does 20k DPS. Claiming one player can maintain perma max party-wide buffs, even though based on the mechanics of the fight, sometimes self-sustain buffing takes the advantage over AoE buffing. Claiming melee DPS is always superior to range DPS, even though Leech Form is range. Dodging eats up 1 second of DPS uptime, not to mention you sometimes need to reposition after a dodge to continue doing melee damage. And we also have to take into consideration the fact that even if you dodge, unlike power type damage, conditions will still continue to do their damage. Claiming Dagger is the Necromancer's strongest PvE weapon, and all the other countless lies and bullshit information you guys have told the community. There are so many I can't even keep track of them all. Even your math in a void has to have by default multiple conclusions since the damage formula contains the monster armor variable in it, which, spoiler alert, you don't know the exact value of. But you guys never bother doing all the hard work. Oh no no no. Why go through all that trouble when you can just make some botched up 30-minute guide with builds which may or may not be even yours? It's not like you guys never got paid for someone else's work before in the past. Have a guild member do some fake math which is like 100 times higher than reality. You know, the good old fake advertising to get more followers trick. And maybe even make some videos with casual plays where you exploit a little bit to show how great you are. That is, if you're not too busy trashing everyone else, because after all, you are the self-proclaimed top players. Anyway, are bursting builds better than condition builds? It depends on the mechanics of the fight. Are condition builds better than bursting builds? It depends on the mechanics of the fight. There is no meta. There never was. There is no best damage build, only best at. And this, my friends, is the beauty of the Guild Wars 2 combat system. The first MMO who successfully broke away from the Holy Trinity format. People thought this was just about the Necromancer or my gods or something like that. No, 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 my friends. This was about all the classes and all the builds. Although if you take a closer look, if you use proper builds for the encounter, you know, the ones made by the Nemesis, you will end up doing the highest damage in a group. And I was even able to hold my own versus Icebow users before Icebow got nerfed in half. Good people of Guild Wars 2, as soon as you stop believing all the lies of their so-called meta, the community will not only become a much better place, since people will stop blaming each other for failing to meet some unrealistic expectations, but you will also come to realize that a lot of the decisions made by the Guild Wars 2 developer team actually make perfect sense. For example, refusing to heavily buff some classes like the Necromancer for such a long time and claiming they are fine because they are fine. Well, not according to the fake math, but then again, they will never be fine according to the fake math. I would be afraid if they would, because the math in a void does not reflect reality. Even if all the monsters in the game are target dummies that have the same armor, do not fight back or have any mechanics, the math in a void is still meaningless because it gives out unachievable values. And one-shotting puny bosses with exploits in your casual runs will not change that. So I will say this one last time. The Necromancer, if played correctly, is just as strong as any other class. You guys honestly think the developers balance their game based on math in a void? That's insane! They of course have custom-made damage meters and a bazillion other tools which aid them greatly with their work. The game might not be perfectly balanced, but it's nowhere near as imbalanced as these delusional theory crafters would have you believe. So what I'm saying is, trust the Guild Wars 2 developer team. So, like I said, I do plan to continue supporting the Guild Wars 2 community in Heart of Thorns with real DPS statistics, perfected builds, and encounter-specific customization options. Yet, in order for me to be able to invest a lot of time and effort into this, I literally require your support. It took me an unimaginable amount of time and effort to develop this video. I think close to 2 months in preparation time. Going through a few dozen recorded fights, calculating the real DPS values for them, which takes me about 50 minutes per calculation. The original script for this video was 16,000 words. I'm not going to lie, I almost gave up a few times, but I didn't. Even knowing that I'll be making on like $20 or $30 off of it. So if the community supports me, I will continue supporting the community. You guys can find the link to my Patreon page in the description of this video. By the way, I also want to make this a thing as part of the ongoing effort against delusional elitism. So feel free to use it. Link is in the description. Now go, my minions. Post this video on every forum, every sub forum, every guild forum. Put it on Reddit. Send it to ArenaNet. Hey Oldman, who do they have to share this video with? Everyone! Okay then. But until next time, enjoy your gaming and have a great day.